We're going to go ahead and get started. We apologize for the delay. We had a scheduling snafu, but soon Kathryn will be here, which we're very excited about. And I'm going to turn it over to Semente.
Sounds great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Semente. I'm Curator of Education and Public Programs here at the Davis. I am thrilled to welcome all of you to our last, but certainly not least, Artist Roundtable for the exhibition In Focus, Wellesley College Faculty Artists. At 4 p.m., we warmly invite you to the reception at the Davis Museum to enjoy some lovely snacks, and where you have a chance to see all of the exhibitions, if you've not seen them yet, that are on view, such as In Focus, as well as the worlds of Ilse Bing, Suzanne Ciani Sound Lounge, a place to relax and enjoy the beanbag chairs, and Only to Be There, Student Traditions at Wellesley. We have also reopened the modern and contemporary level art on level 5, and we are very, very proud of our other new special exhibition, The Immortal Magu, a 16th century Chinese painting up close, which will have corresponding programming on the day of April 8th, which will include a student-only paper-making workshop with Professor Kathryn Ruffin, as well as a curatorial tour with Dr. Yu Hua Ding, and a conservation talk with world-renowned conservator of Asian paintings, Jing Gao. So mark your calendars for April 8th. My shameless plug. The Davis Museum is proud to continue the tradition of hosting the art department faculty artists work every 5 years, and we are and have been all year especially excited about the overlap with Wellesley College's 150th celebrations. I'm especially grateful to enjoy one last semester of teaching with In Focus. It has rendered many insightful conversations, both with students and with public visitors. And I am now pleased to introduce Dr. Nicole Berlin, Associate Curator of Collections and the Curator of In Focus, who will introduce our lovely panel of faculty artists.
Thank you. In Focus highlights the dynamic creative work of professional artists who teach at Wellesley College, bringing together a wide range of media, including photography, painting, collage, sculpture, book arts, printmaking, installation, video, sound, and interdisciplinary practices. The exhibition reflects the breadth and vitality of the college's studio faculty. Featured artists include Kathryn Abarbanel, Genevieve Cohn, Claudia Jaskowitz, Katia Landros, Phyllis McGibbon, Andrew Mowbray, Daniela Rivera, Kathryn Ruffin, and David Tang Olson. Presented as part of the college's anniversary celebrations, In Focus commemorates 150 years of faculty achievement and artistic leadership. It's now my pleasure to introduce this evening's panelists, Kathryn Abarbanel, Phyllis McGibbon, and Genevieve Cohn, all distinguished members of the art faculty here at Wellesley. I've had the privilege of working with each of these artists in my role as exhibition curator, but that perspective is only one point of entry into their work. To truly understand the depth and resonance of the projects on view, it's essential to hear directly from the artists themselves. Their reflections bring to light the conceptual frameworks, material decisions, and lived experiences that shape these works in ways no wall text can fully capture. So, Phyllis, I would love if you could introduce yourself by sharing the central themes that guide your practice and the particular approaches or questions that animate your work.
Thank you. Thank you both for making this possible this evening, and thanks for everyone for coming out on what's turning out to be another wintry afternoon. So appreciate your attention and questions as we're having our discussion today. My name is Phyllis McGibbon, and yes, I've been here for 3 decades now, which I never expected. I was primarily hired here to teach printmaking and drawing, and certainly as an artist, printmaking has been pretty central to my practice, but I take a really expansive view to the medium, so I'm really interested in what happens when you are working with images and can see them shift and evolve over time, and working in multiple and having different multiple parts of images allows me to see different things about juxtapositions and the ways that images talk back and forth to one another. So I teach both drawing and printmaking, and the work that I chose to put in this particular show was a chance for me to kind of look back as well as look forward. And by looking back, it's not only looking back at a progress on a project that I've been working on. In print, we often look at one set of proofs and kind of see where it's been and then try to project forward how the different parts and pieces might come together at the press over time. But it also gave me a chance to look back at other things I had even shown at the Davis. So for example, in 1996, when I was first here up for tenure, I had a show at the Davis Museum, a solo show, and there were two figures, two shadowy figures at the door that I placed in the windows, kind of across from where the history show is right now, and it looked out towards the Jewett, and those. That photograph, which was digital and life-size, was from a series of photographs I had taken on a residency. And as I was looking back over that material, it seemed to me I could reintroduce it to this particular show and this project that I've been working on, which is about a girls' school that was on the other side of the hill in the place where I grew up in Wisconsin. And so we'll talk more about that, I think. But I think this is also a great opportunity for us to welcome Kathryn to join us, who has been stuck in traffic. So I'm so glad you're here. So
Sorry, guys.
okay. Yeah. So looking back and looking forward has been an important part of my work as an artist.
Hi, everyone. I'm Genevieve Cohn. Thank you so much for having us. I've loved the other roundtables so much. And just a reminder that, yeah, everyone is an artist and a teacher, and it's all intersectional, and it's all everything all the time. So I'm a painter, like a painter. And I paint primarily imagined communities of women, however one identifies with womanhood, pulling from real and imagined mythologies and histories. I'll bring together groups of women to discuss what I've been reading and thinking about. I think about all of my work kind of almost as an anthology. So everything that I'm thinking about is imagined communities of women engaging in their world, building their worlds, protecting their worlds, and engaging in some sort of labor practice. And then each body of work functions a little bit like a short story. So there's like a tighter thematic arch that loops it together. And so for each of those thematic arches, I'll bring together groups of women where we discuss and read, and then we dress up and we act out and we play, and it becomes this really embodied experience of manifesting the things that I'm researching and actually having the experience in real life. And then when I go back to the studio, I'm bringing all of that experience into the studio with me. And so I think of myself, like I said, like I'm a painter, but I also am a reader. I think there's an element of performance in these gatherings. I photograph and document these practices when we're all together. Those become drawings, those become small paintings, those become paintings. So there's a lot of life that goes into the painting. And then once I start painting, it kind of gets left behind and it's just responding to the surface. But all that life is stored in it. And the paintings that are in the exhibition are actually a little bit older too. I have a painting from graduate school and a painting that I made when I was on residency in Spain, my first residency ever. I told myself, like, this is the time I'm going to learn how to make small paintings. And then I made that painting. I know. And this actually, I shouldn't say this. Don't do this. But I was like, it was my first residency. I was just out of grad school. I was like, can't afford to ship it. So I like folded it up and stuck it in a suitcase and sent it with me. But she's great. She's doing great. But you can see some of that history on the surface if you look very closely. Great.
Okay. So I, as an artist, I work in many different mediums. I like to joke, but I guess I mean it in a serious way, that I always want to do something I have no idea how to do. That's my interest, it's this kind of chase of something. So I talk my way into it, I talk myself into it, I talk my way into it with somebody. And then there's always this moment where there's tears, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing or how to do it. And then I find a way. So I've worked in film. I've been working on a film for the last 5 years. Installation, sculpture, which you are seeing some of in the Davis, drawing, performance. I'm all over the place, and who knows what's next. But some of the themes that are excuse me, some of the themes that are really important to me in my work. I think a lot about transformation of the body. So in particular, illness, aging, trauma is an important theme in my work, and death is also an important theme. So I look for ways, I could say so much more about this. I always struggle to get to the simple points of things, but I look for ways of feeling in to the work, right? And there's often, whatever I start with, in this case, with the work that we have downstairs, something calls to me. So in this case, it was baseballs. And then I have to think about why that is, that this was calling to me. And then I try to form a new relationship with the thing, with the material or the object, or the context that has called to me. Yeah. Hopefully I answered the question that was asked.
It was only introduce yourself in your practice, so yeah, it was perfect. I just wanted to mention, as an aside, I'm hearing embodied, I'm hearing multimedia, I'm hearing sort of in the realm of what you're working with. And I think all three of your works are incredibly immersive in different ways. Kathryn, I think a point that I was delighted to learn about was that this color is actually the color in your studio. So we're getting insight into you as an artist, both by the work, but also by the color, which I think is wonderful. And Phyllis, the amount of people that I've seen going up to the wallpaper and trying to figure out, like, is it flat? Is it not? And Genevieve, the color work, I see people just standing there, myself included, and just being like completely brought in.
The immersive element of gathering people together to make them, which is new information to me as of the last few months, and I've really enjoyed thinking through what was it like to be in the forest with them.
So our first question is, yeah, this microphone is mad at me. Sure. We're back. What led you to your art practice and to Wellesley College in particular? Could you share a bit more about your practice and approach to art making? And I think part of this question is understanding both how you got started as an artist, like what drew you to it, and then what led you to this point of being at Wellesley College. Anyone can go.
I'll go first. I love this question, I think, especially for this group, because I know there are some people who just like wake up into life and are like, I'm an artist, and it's all they've ever known. And I don't think it was that way for me. I think I was always drawn to making in some capacity, but I was really drawn to everything. Like I was just one of those people that had like really broad interests, but like didn't go so deep. And I was a sports girl for like, that was my main identifier for a lot of my life. I went to a liberal arts undergrad, and I chose my college because they had an exploratory program where you were like intentionally undecided for the first 2 years. Like I was deeply undecided. I ended up studying culture and communications, which is a kind of like the ultimate liberal arts degree. Like it's sociology and anthropology and politics, and I loved all of it. And then when I thought about my future, I was like, I don't know where any of this will go. Like I knew that I like loved learning. I loved studying. I was thinking about a lot of things. I kept taking art classes. I took printmaking my freshman year of my first class. I got in trouble for all like my fingerprints on all the borders, so just painting is better for my inclinations. And I just kept taking an art class every semester because I loved it. I grew up in really rural Vermont. We had 2 art classes at my high school. I'd never known a professional artist. I think my idea of making beyond something that was just for myself was fairly non-existent for a lot of my growing up. And so it wasn't until actually my senior year in college, I was taking life drawing, and I had a meeting with a professor to figure out what I should take my last semester. And she sat me down and said, you need to take yourself more seriously. You need to like think about painting. You should take, like I took an independent study in painting my second semester. And it was the most transformative moment of my entire life, where as soon as she gave me permission to see myself, I never stopped thinking about painting. all of a sudden everything in the world that I'd been studying and thinking about ways of communicating, politics, anthropology, like gender studies, all of that got translated through painting. And it's like one of those things where it kind of scares me. Like I wonder who I'd be if I didn't have that moment. But I feel very lucky that I did. I like to think that I would have found my way to it somehow. And now everything goes through painting. Like it's been just the way that the world has become full of potential and possibility. Everything has a way to be known to me. And I think at the point when I was first like, oh my God, painting, but I was like, ooh, teaching feels like it's more in line with my, like, I think I would love teaching. Like I think with my sensibilities, the way that I move through the world, I was really interested in being part of community and working with people. And so when I went to graduate school, I know you're not supposed to say this, but I was like, I think I want to teach. And if I'm going to teach, I want to be the best painter that I can be. And luckily, like I grew up into those two things very honestly, where like I'm obsessed with teaching and I'm obsessed with painting very genuinely. I think they're the coolest things that we can be doing. Also printmaking and sculpting, all things. But so I feel very lucky that I've been able to find my way in both of these careers in ways just like one thing to the next thing. I feel like being an artist is just being responsive. And so being responsive to each step. And then I've been at Wellesley for 6 years now. So I started as a fellow and have been here for 6 years, and it's been the best experience of my life. It's been really great.
It's beautiful to think about. It's a interesting, hard question. I would say I'm the youngest of 7, and there's a 23-year span between the oldest to the youngest. And I wasn't the only person in my family who was interested in drawing or who, but because I was so much the youngest, I really had an imaginative world as a kid, pretty active in that particular way. So it was really, I think, at some point in school where an art teacher sat my parents down during parent-child conferences or parent-teacher conferences and said, she's really serious about this in a certain way. So I was interested in all kinds of subjects, but I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I went there really because it was the university that I grew up around and near. My father taught there, a completely different other end of the campus from where I spent most of my time. But I was familiar with that particular university, but it was really the experience of being in that undergraduate program and being immersed with a lot of graduate students in printmaking courses that opened up a lot of things for me. And then it was a period of about 1.5 years where I traveled independently and went to many different print workshops throughout the UK and different parts of Western Europe at that point. And meeting other artists who had been trained in very different ways in print really, was exciting for me. And it got me thinking a lot more about making installations and working in artist books in different ways. So when I returned to graduate school, I had a different kind of orientation about what I wanted my art to be doing in many ways. So in terms of how I got to Wellesley, I went by way of Wesleyan University was my first teaching job out of undergraduate, and then I went to Pomona College, and I was on the tenure track there. And I was a little bit frustrated because I didn't have access to any press facilities there. It was only having fellowships and residencies at different print shops for short periods of time, like in the summer. So when this job opened up, it was a former colleague from Wesleyan who said, it's kind of a sideways move, but maybe you'd be interested in Wellesley. And I'd heard of Wellesley College because when I taught at Wesleyan, everybody thought I taught at Wellesley. Because, growing up in the Midwest, at that time, the small liberal arts colleges were definitely not on my radar at all. And I come from a family of mostly engineers and, mathematicians and engineers. People in the sciences, one landscape architect, but the arts were nearby, but not really a central focus for my family. So it was just really kind of finding my own way, and also just having some really wonderful friendships that kind of drew me into print studios because I liked the dialogue that was happening and the way people exchanged ideas and information with one another. And I think of even drawing, and certainly drawing and installation work, as a kind of social act as well, where you're kind of responding to a situation that you don't completely control. So, yeah, that's how I got here.
So sweet. So I'm one of those people who has always been a maker. And so I have lots of questions and lots of things I've had to figure out and lots of left and right turns in my life. But making is, I'm one of those who I've just always done that, and there was really no question. And when I was young, it was really like, oh, when can I stop doing all these other things and just do what I want, which is make things. So I've had a lot of turns that we could have a whole hour, and I could tell you all the different weird jobs I've done. But it's always been for me this question of combining whatever I was doing in my life, whatever I was doing to make a living, to pay my rent, combining that with making. Right, so I used to work in a kitchen. I have all these series of drawings and works that came out of the labor and the time that I spent working in the kitchen. Then for a while I was building houses. My partner and I did that for a number of years, but we got into it because we were working with building materials. And we were like, we don't really understand these enough. We don't understand the processes that go into building a wall or framing something or working with roofing. And we wanted to understand that, and we also needed money, right? So we started building houses, and then a lot of my work was in response to the houses that I was working within. And so that's kind of always been my path, is trying to connect everything together. As I've gotten older, as some of you know, right now I'm teaching a course that focuses on chronic illness and disability in art practice, which is something that's very dear to me. I've been dealing with some pretty serious illnesses and things that are disabling in my life, especially in the last decade. So that has become the thing that I'm also trying to connect in my work. I know this is more about practice, but that's been my journey since the question of making was not really something I came to later. And then I've always loved teaching, so I really wanted to come back into the university, and I think it's a benefit to have been outside of it. And doing all these odd things from, everyone has the classic story of like cleaning toilets or whatever, doing all these different things, and then coming into this space and bringing all of that with me. The reason I am at Wellesley is because Daniela Rivera invited me here when she was taking a leave. And it's been lovely. And I am in the phase of my career where I am adjuncting and just running around like a little rabbit, which is why I'm late, because I'm coming from my class at Harvard. And sometimes I have days where I run back and forth between the two cities and the two campuses like 2 or 3 times. So I feel a little loopy. But that's a bit of my journey.
Wow. With each roundtable, my admiration for all of you and everyone that's come before really grows. That is significant. That the labor of everything you've mentioned, both in your personal journeys and then the labor of being here, I take that very seriously and appreciate you for sharing that. So continuing with this conversation of being an educator as well as an artist, how do you navigate those two roles, and how do those identities inform each other, if at all? Mix up the order or not, whatever.
I think that having an art practice and having a teaching practice live together, at least for me, allows me to be my most honest self. Like I mentioned before, I love teaching and I love painting, and I think the challenge comes there's only so much time, and so I wish there was more time to be able to be have more brain space, and more ability to be on campus longer, and more ability to be in the studio longer. So I think that's a challenge of it that I think everyone negotiates. But in terms of what we're doing, I think I'm a better person. I know I'm a better person because I teach, that to be able to spend time with all of you, to be able to think about why making is important fundamentally, I'm working through my own questions in the studio, but to be able to come to campus and to be thinking about why do we draw, really, and why is it important to keep drawing? The world is changing constantly. Why are we still drawing and why are we still painting? How do we learn most effectively? How do we build ways of being together meaningfully into what's happening in the classroom? And those are also things that I come back into the studio with. That those are the questions that keep me excited and inspired. I learned so much from all of you, and I think also teaching in this community where I've learned more from teaching with the people here than I even thought was possible. And so I think, I think we're very, very lucky to be living in this way, that both teaching and having an art practice allow us and require us and ask us to just continually be sensitive to the world around us, that we have to be very present and be very like active and participate fully in the world. That, yeah, we can't take things for granted in this space. And so I'm grateful for the way that it challenges me. And it's just fun. Like, I think it's so fun. Yeah, I'll leave on that one.
I've always felt like my own work was better because I had the kind of workout of relating to other people and seeing how other people think through something and see something that when I see a student challenging themselves, I kind of ask myself, how am I challenging myself when I go back to the studio? There's a lot of back and forth that is just built into it and is really joyful in lots of ways. And also, it's the kind of job that definitely keeps you awake at night. I mean, I don't know how many students know how often I'm kind of thinking about them, thinking like, what if they did this to the work, or what else is burdening them? Like, there is that kind of projection towards another that I think is really a beautiful thing. And I will say that the momentum of being an artist in academia is something I still struggle with a lot. Like, I think it was even easier earlier in my career to get more done in my studio than it is now. Like, I think there's different kinds of roles that one has to take on, the longer one is in an academic environment. And so there's different kinds of challenges. So sometimes I'm like so ready to like jump in on Friday on something in the studio, and then I have a couple more things that just need to be done. So that's life. And these are all good problems to have, frankly, in this world. But the momentum of like when a project is starting to really surge and then realizing I really need to take care of these other things, that is different in some ways and has changed over time in different ways. But also when I think about just the trajectory of having taught here for a while, there was a period, it's been at least 15 years now, but there's a period in my life when I was going through cancer treatments, and I have to say that, when I came back to teaching after 3 semesters off, I realized what an incredibly important thing that we do together in a studio environment, and that is to make the point of like deciding where we're going to put our attention. And if you've spent time in a chemo room, and I hope many of you have not, but and won't have to, but if you are, you realize how important it is to be able to direct your attention to something that's going to calm yourself or calm your body or help the healing process in a particular kind of way. And I think the ability to shift away from whatever the mediated message is coming through the TV or whatever it is in a given space, or the struggles of our time on our phone, to be able to control one's awareness in a way, and to really look at connections between things that would be otherwise so easy to miss, that's just an important lesson for life. And so in studio, a lot of times we are like looking at things that would seem to be unimportant on some level, and yet are incredibly important because of how we direct our attention. So for me, the real joy, I think, of teaching in studio environment, particularly this one, is the responsiveness, the opportunity to respond to something I'm not expecting, and to see something from another angle because of the energy that my students bring to the table each time.
It's so beautiful. You're making me think about this as an aside before I answer the question, but I was thinking this morning as I was preparing for this talk about how illness and things like that, they force you into a new relationship with the world. And nobody wants to be forced, nobody wants to go through these things, but they open different possibilities or different ways of you see different things. It's literally like unfolding the matrix in a way. I'm going to go, when I think about teaching, I know a number of people who think of teaching itself as a creative practice, and I really relate to that. I talked a few minutes ago about how I like the chase, and just like trying to figure out something I don't know how to do and feel my way into it, as I said, but there's uncertainty there of not, like, being comfortable working with something unknown, trying to find a new way to know something. And I think it's just as exciting for me to do that in teaching and to be there in the classroom and try to help people find the chase something that's meaningful and exciting to them, and then become more comfortable with really not knowing what they're doing, which we're often told like you're supposed to know. And I personally think you shouldn't know. You sort of have theories, and then later you have different theories after you're done with the thing you're doing. And I just find that so exciting. And I love being there with people. You know, I often also collaborate in my art practice because I just like the momentum of like bouncing things off of each other. We all have such different entry points. And here, everyone who comes into the classroom is so exciting. Like someone comes from, you know, something about neurocognition, or someone is studying classics, and suddenly that's coming into the classroom, and we're figuring out like, how does that, do you want that to relate to your art project, and how can it? So that's one answer that I have to that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Can you all, in whatever order you'd like, speak a little bit your relationship to materials? What does your process look like from the first spark of an idea to a finished work? And at what point does it change course, if at all? But particularly starting with, how do you even go about choosing the materials that you end up working with? Maybe Kathryn, do you want to start? We're here, and we have such intriguing materials to think from.
So how do I? It's both how do I take a project from sort of beginning to end, and how do I relate to materials? Okay. So as I said, there's like an instinct. Everyone's like, why the baseballs? What's up with the baseballs? That was my question too, right? There was just a sort of fixation, and then I started to unravel that, right? But literally. But I have been thinking about this idea of breaking, of like once I have the baseball and I knew I wanted to open it up, there's breaking something, which is like to rupture it, or, you know, but also breaking like to slow down, which is hilarious because you can hear how quickly I speak. So there's like maybe my own desire to be someone who can slow down in certain ways. I feel that the world moves very quickly. So I try to slow down and spend time sort of dismantling something, in this case, baseballs. And that's like to try to get beyond, you know, what I would call a kind of relational myopathy, this idea that there's like only one thing that, like only one way we can experience a thing or understand what it is. And then from there, I have the chance to kind of build a new vocabulary. And so with this project, it started with the ball, and then as I started to open those up, I started to like have a desire for like some other materials. And so like if I had been here on time, I had all the little balls in their different layers that I was going to lay out on the table for you so I could point to them. But so when you get into the first layer, there's this like feathery, kind of stringy white layer, right? And every ball was different, like especially like different ages and different like fabrications. So I was looking for some material that would be like a slippage from the string to something that still kind of felt like it. And I found the feather, right? And so the feather was one of the first things that came in because it had this like I don't know if any of you remember, like Dua Lipa did a performance, I think it was on SNL, with the ostrich feather hat that was like this incredible hat, and it just like, it looked like a jellyfish. And so there's this kind of, when you're around the feathers, you breathe and they move, you walk by and they like, you know. So I found the feather, and then as I kept working, I was like, how does that kind of, you know, continue? Like what else comes into this? And so I started looking at like these gray wool layers, and then that led me to kind of like bringing some branches in, which I had never thought plant was going to come into this work. And then the branches were kind of like too big and unruly. But then I'd go out, and I have a little dog that some of you have met. I'm kind of obsessed with him. I have to walk him regularly, right? So I go out on these walks, and that was, you know, my attempt to slow down. I would look around and I would find all these plants. I would be like, oh, and then I just started grabbing stuff. And it was summer, and I would be out a couple times a day, and I'd be like, oh, I saw those yesterday and the day before, and they looked totally different. So then I would bring the same plant back in like these different stages of like growing, and then later moving into like seed pod, from the flower to the seed pod to drying. And I was fascinated. So I was just I had this whole, like, I have plants hanging everywhere, dried plants, and like, oh, thank you, don't worry about it. Dead plants, and thank you, Phyllis. And then I just started kind of intuitively working those into these objects that I was making one by one. So there's no like key point. It's like constantly evolving until I run out of time, basically.
And I have really enjoyed the way that the works themselves have evolved throughout the time they've been on view. I went back down there today with some teachers that are bringing their students in a couple of weeks. And I'm like, wait a minute, some of these plants look really different from when the show opened. So it's really interesting that they continue to live or unlive, decay, if you will. But they change. The change is continuous, and it's been really wonderful.
If you asked me 6 months before the show went up what it was going to look like, I might have expected it to be very blue because I was doing a lot of cyanotypes at that point. And I had different ideas about color happening. And then there was just a point where it just seemed to get the show clear. I began to drop out the color. But there are cyanotype collages that were important in terms of seeing how one image might go together with another on this project. When I was on sabbatical, right before this, I had a series of different residencies. I was at the Center for Contemporary Print in Norwalk, Connecticut, and there I was doing cyanotypes primarily with the materials, and some other printing as well. And then I was at the Z Mays studio out near Northampton, so that I was doing a lot of photopolymer gravure plates there, which allows you to print intaglio. And then I was up at Direct Angle Press in New Hampshire, up in the White Mountains, and there I was doing risographs and letterpress. And in each case, I was trying to move this artist book forward as quick as I could because I had just a semester to focus on it away. And I actually so the choice of materials in some ways had to do with time and what time I thought I had to be able to resolve certain things in a certain way. That all kind of blew apart. So I would say in many respects, time sometimes determines for me what seems to go right for a particular set of options, and it's the kind of the conditions that I'm working with in that way. But I would also say that a lot of this has to do with the privilege if one is able to have a stable workspace for a while, a studio. And that's not an easy thing, especially in this part of the country, to be able to maintain a studio and have enough of your things around and the equipment that you need at a given time. And that's one of the gifts of a school or a university and college environment, is to have access to different kinds of equipment. Not so easy to do when you're not in school anymore, and even when you're teaching, especially teaching here, we have to secure our studios in other spaces, our own personal spaces. So during COVID, I was sitting in my studio in the woods in Holliston, Massachusetts, and I was surrounded by a whole lot of work in storage. And that's when I started to realize the connections between certain images that I had never really thought about in the same way. It was because they were physically present around me, and I saw them in a new light. And I saw them while sitting in the woods, and that took me back to the girls' school and imagining, adolescents running through the woods and all the things that were just part of my growing up. That helped me thematically, but also I think it was because there was a physical presence of the work surrounding me. And so, for a lot of artists, especially young artists, you're so nomadic, kind of moving from one place to another, taking some of your work with you, looking for supplies, looking for places to be able to land and install something. And so, the question of materials is often a matter of access to space and time.
Yeah, I spoke a little bit at the beginning about I think of my practice almost of having like two big breaths. Like the first is like a lot of like intake, and then the painting is like an exhale in some way. So I have these through lines that travel throughout my practice of these communities of women. They're things that I'm researching and thinking about constantly. It's, I think, what ties a lot of the imagery together. And then I read so much, less during the semester. In my best case scenario, I'm reading a short story every day before I go into my studio. So reading fiction and specifically short stories, magical realism, poetry and prose poetry. And that's actually where the seeds of most of my kind of bodies of work come from. So I'll be reading and thinking and like collecting a lot of information, looking at the world. I have like a folder on my phone that's just all the color palettes that I see, that I find in like cracks in the sidewalk and chip paint. And so it's like a lot of just noticing, reading. And then I think one example, I had a show a few years ago, and I was reading and rereading this book that I've read. I started reading it in college, and I've reread it probably every year since. It's called Einstein's Dreams. Has anyone read Einstein's Dreams before? Of course you have. And so it's a collection of short stories where every chapter is a world where time exists in a different way. And so this is a book that I think about all the time. I'm always thinking about time. And there's one world where you only live for one rotation of the light. And so you only experience each time of day one time. So I was reading the story and then I was thinking about it through the lens of my own practice. So oftentimes it's like the way that something functions and then it overlaps and becomes complicated by the research that I'm already thinking about. So I was imagining this story and I was thinking about my communities of women, and then I was thinking about like the allegory of the cave and from Plato about like what is truth, like how do we really know things, how do we come to know. So the meaning gets like layered, and I'm writing a lot and I'm sketching and I'm thinking and I'm scheming. And then I brought together a group of women. I asked them all to read the story. I asked them all to read Plato's Cave. And we came together and we discussed like what would it be like to live in a world where we only experienced each time of day once, and like what would be our kind of objective, what would we want to do. And so the body of work developed as these women. There were 2 rooms in the gallery, and each room, the women, I imagine they were born at different times of day, and they were trying to record the light that they knew before it passed. And so together with this group of women, and then I was thinking about like science projects and like what's accessible, like if we just, this was the world that we were placed in, like the little knowledge that we already have about these things, like how could we imagine ways of knowing? And so we tried to think about, okay, we would be tracing shadows, we'd be measuring the moon tides, we came up with all these like invented ways of trying to capture time. So we were thinking about the archive and history, all these things. So then we so we discussed it and then we acted it out, and we like got together in the daytime, we got together at night, we like, everybody wore overalls. And we like actually kind of played. So there's like this play that's happening and we're telling stories and my mom comes. So it's like intergenerational and she brings some friends. And then I go back to the studio and it's wild because I like, at this point I have like so many photos. I have so many drawings. I have so many things that I'm thinking about. I like work through, I get an idea of the composition, and then I start painting, and it's the wildest thing of holding on to meaning and letting go of like explicit knowledge, where the painting just takes on a life of its own. And I think has anyone rock climbed before? I rock climbed like 3 times and I was like, this changes everything. Cause I was partway up the wall and I was like, oh, this is my painting practice. Cause the way that I work in acrylic paint, I switched partway through graduate school, and I think not living in the rules that I had learned painting in allowed me just to be like, what is paint to me? And I make one giant move at a time. So I start with like a big wash of a color, and then I step back and I respond, and then I make a big move of another color. And so it's like rock climbing, where you make a move, you see what possibilities are available to you, you make the next move. And every step is dependent on the ones that came before. You can't just like end up somewhere on the top of the wall. But it also like things get buried. And that's the thing that I love the most about painting, is it becomes a stored history where there's all this life. It's a record of our body. And especially at the scale that I like to work, that it's like my body is present in that painting. And some of it gets left behind, and some of it and all these paintings go through so many lives before there's like 50 paintings stored in these paintings. And I love that there's like this secret history. And everything that came before needed to happen in order to end up where I ended up. But it also doesn't all come to the surface at the same time. So I think this act of like revealing and exposing, both in like process and before and after painting, like the whole part of it is, like where meaning gets held and where it gets revealed.
We're nearing the end of our time, but we want to make sure and leave time for any questions that you all in the audience might have for our artists. So if you have a question, you can just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you.
Asking for a friend. Genevieve, how do you recruit the women?
So it started just with the like the folks that were close to me, and it started like it didn't start as this big like kind of meaningful thing. I was like, I need to know what the bodies are up to, and then it like developed, like the meaning kind of folded in as I did it. So it was just the people that were closest to me, and then they invited people, and then every once in a while I'll be like, I think you could use this, or I think we could use you. But this is something. Actually, this past summer, I was doing a residency, and I was talking about, and I used to just call it like my photo shoot experience. And the person at the residency like stopped me, and they're like, "You need to take this more seriously." This is a common thread, I think, for me. Maybe now that I'm saying this out loud in this very moment, realizing, but it was like this is an actual practice. Like this is something that you need to take care of, and this is something I've been thinking about, and I think mentioning just like the rhythms of the semester and like where we have energy to like kind of build things, and so. It's something I'm continuing to think about, like how can it be more inclusive? Because I think that is most beautiful about it is that I get opinions and experiences beyond my own. And so like this past summer I did another residency, and it was like with the residents that were there. And if people have ideas, if people are excited about it, then I'll remember to invite you. And it happened, like sometimes we go to Vermont, sometimes it's just in the woods of Boston. Like sometimes it's like a destination thing, and sometimes it's just like, we're all here. Like, and sometimes like when I'm going for walks with friends, they just know, they like see a stick and they're like, okay. And they're like, no, like they know how to, they know how to crowd. So if you ever gone for a walk with me, Megan, like, you know that you're probably at some point going to have to like pick something up and put it down again. But yeah, and it's evolving, but I think it's something that, I want to continue expanding. Like I love the idea that for my whole life, I can continue building this project into something that's like more inclusive and more expansive, and maybe is more like project based, or it's not just like my own, there's so much room for it to grow into different things. But if you're interested, let me know.
We have time for one more question, if anyone.
Hi, I was wondering how the, I guess as educators and then also creators, makers, artists, how the marks that you want to leave on your students, like in the courses you teach, and the marks you want to leave on your audience through the art you create, how they're the same or different, or any thoughts you have on that?
I wouldn't actually phrase it as marks on somebody. It's more of an invitation, right? And in the case of students, I hope they know themselves better after they've had time with me, and that they feel a different sense of self-empowerment on some level. So they get some specific skills, but what really matters is how they apply it in their own way, and deal with their own uncertainties that inherently happen when we're working with materials that tell us other things, or images that show us things we didn't expect, right? In the case of a visitor, though, I don't think of a visitor or someone who comes to look at my work. I don't think of them as a student, but I do try to make work that would reward a really close looker. Someone who really looks close, that there's something on the edge to be found, and if they choose to go there, this is from my work with installation, you never know when someone walks into an installation piece which way they're necessarily going to travel in the space, and where they're going to dwell, and whether they might turn away from some key information. But you can leave like certain little moments for people to discover. And I'm a big believer in what people discover for themselves is a whole lot more important than what you tell them. Even though I talk to my students a lot, I'm afraid sometimes. But I do think that setting up conditions for them to discover something is important to me. And I guess that's the thing that maybe is the same with both of them. But I don't necessarily think about leaving a mark on somebody necessarily. That feels kind of almost violent to me. But I'm sure you didn't mean it that way. But it's interesting to think about how to be of service to someone else, and how the traces that you leave on a surface can be something that someone can find something in for their own uses, right?
So I think with my work and also with teaching, one of the things that maybe one of the goals is to like share with people the ways they might experience the world differently, right? So I'm making a lot of jokes about my own brain and the speed that I move at today. That's fine, you know. That's like it's my kryptonite, right? It's like my strength and my weakness, and it's everything. So I think a lot about how everything around us is relational. Everything is sort of like, it depends on the ways in which we perceive things, we perceive their functions. And I'm really interested in trying to open up, even to the point of like, sometimes I'm thinking so many things. I look at the baseball and I'm like, it's an embryo, it's the universe, it's everything. Oh my God, you know, and I can't even like pick which thing to say. But to get to that point where there's so many possibilities for thinking about the ways things are connected to each other and what they might mean and what they might link to and how we might unravel some of that. I think that's one of the things I hope that I can share in the teaching, is this sort of opening up of interpretations and possibilities.
Yeah, I think I agree with both those things. That's such a beautiful way to say it. But I think, yeah, it's like the like helping to create opportunities to know that there's more than we know and you can know. That, like, I think I'm so interested in learning, and that in a drawing class, for like I'm teaching 2 drawing classes right now, and like I hope you will learn how to draw. I see you, Omar. But more than anything, I want you to know that there are things that you don't even know you don't know yet. And that is everything about the world is full of like possibilities beyond what we already have awareness to care about. And then not only like do you not know it yet, but then you can know that you don't know it. And then you can wrestle with that, and you can be curious about it, and you can find ways through it, and you can like build that relationship with not knowing. And I think, so it's like this opening up that like everything is full of potential and you have agency in the way that you relate to it. I imagine like my practice has similar things, but I think that's the magic of teaching and learning, and especially art, that it is all of those things. Yeah.
So I think we will wrap there, but any lingering questions, please come to the Davis and ask our artists in person. This is our last roundtable, so thank you to all of you for coming to them. I also wanted to say a very quick thank you to Shannon Nelson, who is over at the museum. But Shannon has made all of the logistics of all of these roundtables possible, from the beautiful floral arrangements to the delicious snacks. So if you see Shannon over at the Davis, please say thank you and hello. Thank you, Dr. Semente. Your experience as both an artist as an educator, I think, has only made these roundtables that much better, and I really appreciate you co-hosting them with me. And above and beyond, thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to all 9 of you. Every artist that has come up here has shared not just about their practice, but about themselves, things that are very internal. And there's a lot of, I think, bravery and transparency in sharing all of those things with us. So thank you.